What is going on, everyone? Today I'm going to be giving you my spoiler-free review for 28 Years Later, which is the third film in the 28 Days Later franchise, which I did react to those first two movies on this channel, so definitely go check those out, link in the description. This is a franchise that I think is quite good. I think it's honestly one of the scariest portrayals of zombies. I know some people think it's not actually zombies, they shouldn't be called zombies, but I don't care. I'm going to call them zombies. I actually think they refer to them as zombies at least once in this movie as well, which was interesting. Regardless, it's definitely one of the scariest portrayals of zombies that we've ever seen in fiction. And I was very excited for this movie. I was so excited to see how it was going to follow up this universe. I knew it wasn't going to have heavy connections to the first two films. It was going to kind of be its own thing. And it is starting a trilogy of films as well. This is the first of two other films that they're planning. I believe they've already shot at least the second one that's coming out next year, so definitely excited for that. But this film was really not what I was expecting whatsoever, to be honest, but kind of in a good way. So let's get into it. We're gonna go through the positives, the negatives, and then I'll give this movie a rating out of 10. So starting off with the positives, Danny Boyle's directing is so good. It is so incredible. That is my favorite thing about these movies, is just his insanely unique style. That is one of my favorite things about a director, is when they can really give their movies their own feel, to the point where you can watch just, a 10-second clip from their movie and you'll immediately know, oh, that's a Danny Boyle film. And I actually haven't seen many of his other films. I definitely should, but his 28 Days Later movies, oh my god, they're just so fast-paced and crazy. The way he's able to visualize something as simple as a zombie getting hit by an arrow, it's just so cool. Like there's these scenes where he'll have the arrow go through the zombie and they'll kind of like cut to the right and then cut to the left. Like it's really weird. Almost looks like a video game cutscene, like finishing move sort of a thing. But it works. It really works. And he doesn't do it for every zombie kill, but for a lot of them he does. And the cuts just, they work so well. And like, I usually don't like when movies cut too much in a scene. I like when there's more like one takes and you're just kind of like focusing on things for longer periods of time. But I think the constant cutting that happens in the editing with these movies, especially with 28 Years Later, it makes the scenes more intense. It adds to the anxiety. And there's a couple of scenes in particular that are insanely anxiety inducing because of those cuts, the nonstop cuts back and forth between all sorts of gruesome things, quick cuts. You just see the most terrifying thing for like a split second, but it cuts away. It adds to the tension and it adds to how terrifying this movie can be. And there's a lot of that here. So that stuff is fantastic. And you have a lot of that in this movie. Genuinely one of the most interesting movies I've seen in this whole year from a directing standpoint. So if you're a fan of movies that are really interestingly shot, this is definitely something you'll enjoy. And in terms of it being scary, I would say it's even scarier than the first two films. There are a lot of scenes that genuinely had me like terrified for what's about to happen. And I think it's the way they were able to visualize the zombies in this movie. They're just way creepier in this one. Since it's been 28 years of this virus, they're at a point now where they're much more decomposed, and there's like bloater ones that have like a lot of extra weight to them. There's these new zombies they call alphas that are like these like special versions that are like really strong, almost like they're on steroids. Like so many interesting things they do with the, I guess, rage virus victims, I'll call them, because I know people are going to get mad if I keep calling them zombies. But like so many interesting things they do with them, and they are terrifying. The gore is insane, a lot of practical effects. There are some things that I'm gonna call them zombies that they do in this movie that you've never seen them do before in this franchise, but it works so well. There's one kill in particular that I think is like one of the coolest things. Actually, that same kill happens twice, and it's so cool. It's kind of paying homage to another franchise that I'm sure a lot of you will recognize when it happens, but it was really cool. The sound design is also really incredible in this movie. Sometimes it's really simple, but they use it in a really good way. Just like one scene where there's a character that's hanging upside down and it's just the blood dripping from the head, and you just hear the dripping of it from a pretty far distance, but it just adds so much to the eeriness, and they do such a great job with that sound design. Even just the sound design of how the zombies sound, all of it is fantastic. Now, story-wise, this honestly impressed me quite a bit. I thought the stories of the first two movies were good, but I didn't think they were great. I always thought it was just they were good zombie films. They had a lot of good action, they had a lot of good tension, a lot of good scary moments, but I never really felt like I was in love with the characters or the story. But this movie, I think, did a much better job with its story. I was actually really attached to the characters, in particular, the main character, which was a kid named Spike. And he has two parents, the dad being played by Aaron Taylor Johnson and the mom being played by Jodie Comer. And all three of these characters are great. I think they are very interesting. They have a lot of depth to them, and what the story does with them is quite interesting. I like how it's split up as well. There's moments with Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, his name's Jamie, and there's a lot of other moments with Jodie Comer's character, Isla, and they get a good amount of screen time, and the very different dynamic that each of these characters have with their son, Spike, was really interesting. And the movie honestly kind of subverts your expectations when it comes to their dynamics. You really weren't expecting what dynamics they were going to have, and it was honestly quite the opposite of what I originally expected based on what the opening of the movie was like. They're not the only good characters in this movie. Ralph Fiennes plays Dr. Kelson, and he is great as well. He's not in a lot of the movie, but when he's in it, he's fantastic. And there's also another character named Eric. Not to go too in depth with his character, but he was quite interesting because he's a character that actually comes from another country. He's actually not from the UK itself, because of course, what these movies are all about, it's all about them being contained to the United Kingdom. That's where the virus is. And so the rest of the world is completely normal. They're just kind of quarantining the UK. And this character is from another country, and he comes in, doesn't really mean to come in, obviously, because once you're in there, you're stuck in there, you can't leave. So he's now trapped there, and the dynamic between him and Spike is quite interesting because Spike has not interacted with the real world at all. He's not interacted with everything going on outside of the UK, so he doesn't know what technology is like. He doesn't know what iPhones are. He doesn't know a lot of the things that this character Eric knows about. So they have a lot of back and forth. Some of it's funny, honestly, like they use some dark humor with it, but it's also just interesting to hear these characters talk about this stuff. And that was a dynamic I wasn't expecting to see, but because we're 28 years into this virus apocalypse thing going on, it makes sense you would have stuff like that happening. So I'm glad that they did. The movie does a great job of world building as well, not just with what I just talked about, but also within the United Kingdom itself. You have this whole new community that the main characters are at, which is on this island. And the island is pretty safe from the infected because they're, on an island. It's pretty hard to get there. The zombies can't run across the water. They can't swim, at least. So they don't really have to worry about that too much. But when they want to get out of there, they have to rely on the tide kind of like going down in order to access this sort of bridge that they have. And I really like that concept. And then when it comes to the rest of the world, or they don't explore too much of it, but when they do explore it, there are a couple different characters that you meet. Some of them interesting, some of them kind of wacky and almost a little too campy for the movie, but I actually thought it worked, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to be talking about this scene for a while, but it's the end of the movie. There's a scene involving a new group. And yeah, it's kind of weird, but I didn't think it was a negative. So I saw some people saying it was a negative for the movie. I personally didn't mind it. It was really out there, but it kind of was okay. I thought it was kind of cool. I don't know. Those of you who haven't seen the movie have no idea what I'm talking about, but those of you who have seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Also, I really like the themes of this movie. It's mostly about death and the inevitability of it and letting go. And that section of the movie that was all about that, because I guess that wasn't like the whole movie necessarily, but when that was the focus, I thought it was probably some of the strongest and most powerful stuff of the movie. And it was definitely the section of the movie that was the least horror focused. There was not a lot of zombies, there wasn't a lot of action. It was mainly focused on this element of the inevitability of death and how sometimes it's better to have it be in situations that are more peaceful and less painful, and even if that means having less time with your loved ones. Really interesting, that topic that they focused on there, and it actually was quite emotional. Like, it actually brought a tear to my eye, which I was not expecting for this movie to do that. So I actually liked that quite a bit. The dialogue was very powerful, like really good stuff there. And lastly, for the positives, I just really appreciated the stylistic and artistic nature of this movie. I just love seeing films like that where it's just a passionate filmmaker, I guess, multiple filmmakers just coming together to make this really incredible, interesting, unique story. And it's obviously part of a franchise, but it's a franchise that's been Danny Boyle and Alex Garland's, it's been their baby since the beginning. So they were able to just do what they wanted with it. And they did a great job. They really did. I think this turned out to be fantastic. And I'm very excited to see what they do next with the 2 sequels that should be coming hopefully soon. I believe the next one's next year, but I don't know about the 3rd one. But there are some negatives I have to talk about. Honestly, there's not a lot of negatives here. I do think this movie was incredible, but the first negative, which kind of is what I just talked about, it is a part 1 of a trilogy, and it really feels like a part 1. And this might seem like a weird negative because a lot of people are going to say, well, you know, it's supposed to be a part 1, obviously, so what's the problem? But I think when you're doing something like that with a movie where you have a part 1, part 2, part 3, or even just a part 1 and part 2, I think you need to find a way to make it still feel like it can stand on its own. You know what I mean? I think the Lord of the Rings trilogy does a great job with this. You know, obviously each of those films is a part of the full story, but Fellowship of the Ring is still a jam-packed movie that definitely feels like it can stand on its own. I don't think it needs to wrap up the story in order to feel satisfying and fulfilling. And this movie was satisfying, but I think the problem is that when it ended, I did kind of feel a little like, you know, I really felt like that was like the first half of a movie. It does not feel like a full movie. Like the movie ended in a way to where I still felt like I wanted a lot more, but like now, you know, obviously we're going to get that stuff with part 2, but I felt like this movie in particular should have had a bit more. I'm not really sure what would have made that not be a problem for me. I think part of it might have been the structure of the film, because the way the movie's structured, the last like 30 to 40 minutes of the movie doesn't have a lot of like horror, tension, action. Like there's not a lot of stuff going on with the zombies. That stuff is mostly the first half of the film. There's like a couple moments towards the end, but most of it is in the beginning. The last 30, 40 minutes of the movie was focused on this. Well, it was the main storyline of the film, really, which I don't want to say what it is because it's kind of a big spoiler, but they kind of get into a position where, like I said, there's just no infected for a while, not really much of that. And so when it gets to the point where the movie ends, I'm kind of just like, I feel like there should be a little bit more here. But again, that's going to be the part 2. I understand that. It does make me have a slight negative feeling towards this first film. Still a fantastic movie, but I can't help but feel it. And this last negative is the biggest nitpick of all time, to the point where you can just forget I even said this. It's really not a big deal. I'm just going to point it out anyways. I love that iconic 28 Days Later theme. You know what I'm talking about. The iconic song. It's such an incredible piece of music, so iconic to the point where the movie Kick-Ass felt the need to use it in their own movie. I'm sure they paid the licensing for it, but regardless, they used it in their movie. It's iconic. It was in 28 Weeks Later as well. It was not in this movie at all, unless I missed it. I don't know, but I don't think I did. So I think they just simply didn't have it in the movie. And look, they didn't need to have it. You know, they didn't have to have it. That's fine. But like, I really wanted it there. You know what I mean? Like, I really did. I thought it would have been cool. And it had a great soundtrack, this movie, but I really wanted it, man. It's such a good piece of music. I really wanted it. Overall, this movie is fantastic, and I'm really glad it turned out the way it did. Honestly, one of my favorite movies of the year thus far. I'm going to give this a solid 9.4 out of 10. It was so good. I know there's a lot of people who aren't going to like it. There's going to be a lot of people who didn't like the tone of some of the scenes, who didn't like the structure of the movie. I'm totally expecting a lot of those opinions. I personally loved it. I really was on board, and I cannot wait for the rest of this trilogy. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I will see you on my next one. Peace out.